go through how to read it, and then I do another V-class on, and I use a poem from the course. And because I'm going to be gone next week, I've kind of had to change things a little bit. I thought we're going to actually use a poem from the course assignments to actually go through the steps in reading a poem. And so the poem that we're going to look at throughout this process today is Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen. And so why are we going through the process of reading a poem? Well, what I found is that if there's one area that students seem to struggle with the most, it's poetry. Poetry and William Shakespeare, because William Shakespeare uses a lot of poetry in his work. So this is probably because there's an element of interpretation to most poems, and there are so many figurative devices used that you almost have to put on a detective cap to understand and interpret what's being said. And so another reason that we're doing this is because there's always a poetry component in the provincial exam. So I see we have some people who love poetry and others who don't, right? And that's same with my year's experience in classrooms. It was the same thing. I'd say probably 3/4 of students didn't like poetry and about 1/4 did. Okay, so our plan for today then is that we're going to read and analyze the Dulce et Decorum Est poem, following the steps for how to read a poem. And I should mention too that the assignment that's in the class where you look at this poem, you're just given a number. It's a question mark assignment, and so you're just given a number of multiple choice questions. But I find that students tend not, if there's one assignment kind of in the course or the poetry unit that they don't do that great at, it's probably this one. And so people think, oh well, it's just going to be a multiple choice, questions. But you do need to go through the poem first, and you need to analyze and interpret the meaning and the message in the poem first, which I think is the challenging part. Okay, so before we get into looking at the poem, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the poet. So he was born in 1893 and he died in 1918. He was a British poet and he was also a soldier. And he wrote about the horrors of war, which was in contrast to the public perception and other patriotic poems. And so you've probably learned in social studies about kind of the propaganda that went out that made it look like joining the war was this wonderful thing, and that everybody would be a hero, and so there were really this kind of glamorization and glorification of war. And so he had this real different idea that came out in his poems, but he actually was in wars, so he would have a first-hand account of what was actually occurring. And he actually was killed in action a week before the war ended. So the first step in analyzing any poem is to look at the title. So the title of this poem, Dulce et Decorum Est. And so just to look at that, first of all, Sam, I know that you've read the poem, but I'm not sure about the rest of you. So if you've read the poem, can you give me a happy face? Sam's our expert here. Sam's also doing a project on the poem. So great. Okay. So Sam, you would know what Dulce et Decorum Est means, but if you were just to sit there and you didn't have a computer to go Google it or look it up, and you didn't know the language, you wouldn't know what it meant, right? But so all we can tell right now, really, pretending that we don't have that background information, is that it's a different language, right? So at this point, that's all at the beginning. If this was the first time you were looking at the poem, you'd look at and you'd say, okay, the title is going to be of some kind of significance. A title should be, and it's a different language. Okay, so that's all we know at this point. All right, then if you had the opportunity to go and Google it and looked it up, you would find out that it means sweet and fitting it is to die for one's country. And the line originates from Horace, a Roman poet, from way, way back in the BCs. Would the average reader know this? No, but in this case the translation is provided. Okay, so if you were to look at this poem, you might find a little footnote at the bottom of the poem or somewhere on there that would give the translation. And in the provincial exam, when they have words that they think that you're not going to know at a grade 10 level or something of a different language, they will provide a little footnote with the translation. Okay, so after you think about the poem's title, you move on to the second step, which is to read the poem straight through. And what I wanted to do here, actually, you'll get a much better reading, is I'm going to take you to a YouTube site here. So hopefully you can see this.
The current of vile, incurable souls on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest, children ardent for some desperate glory, Decorum et Decorum est, pro patria mori.
Okay, so I chose that reading, and so it was simply a reading with a picture. It wasn't a video, right? And I chose that one for a reason, because I just wanted you to listen to it, because if you were actually going through and reading the poem for the first time, hi Michaela, I'm not quite sure what to do about that other than we can wait a minute while students maybe go through and just read the poem on their own there. Just let me know when it's done playing for you. Okay, sorry about that, you guys. You know, you want to, as a teacher, I want to add, you know, some kind of visuals and video and that kind of thing, and then there's always seems to be these technical kind of glitches. Everybody's systems run at different paces and so forth. So what I was saying is that I chose that one. So there are so many. If you go on YouTube, there are so many versions of that poem, videos that people have created. There's some really, really good ones, ones that students have created, and ones that where people have added pictures from war. But I chose that one because if you were going through and reading it on your own for the first time, you wouldn't have all of these images and stuff to help paint the picture in your mind of what's going on. You have your own imagination, and you have what the poet's done to add to that. And a really good poem, just when you read it, is going to create those images in your head if the poet's done a really good job and added lots of literary and poetic devices, right? So I chose one just so basically we could listen to the reading of it and not worry about pictures that other people had in mind. But later at the end, I actually have one more that I want to show you where it's a little more graphic. Okay, so you want to read the poem straight through. So basically, we've just listened to a reading of it. And then ask yourself, okay, what do we know and what don't we know? So think about the who in this poem, what's going on, when it was going on, and the where. And so I'll add a text box here. And if you guys want to, what happened there? Go ahead and make some points there. Go ahead and add. So what do we know? We've got two columns here. What do we know and what don't we know? So anything that comes to mind that we now know about this poem from that first reading. Good. Yep. So I see somebody's already added something. So keep on going. And if you have questions, things that you don't know, go ahead and add them in that other column. And it's really unfortunate that I can't bring up the poem so we can look at the poem at the same time. Normally that's what you would do while you're analyzing it, right? So you'd be able to just look over at the poem and think about these things as you're looking at the poem. All right, so we've got a good start to get us thinking about what we do know about the poem and what we don't. So we know that there was deadly gas. We know that it's about a man who's in war, and we know that somebody in the poem was trying to get their helmet on and didn't get it on fast quick enough, and they died from the gas. We know that the soldiers are tired, and let me just go back to the poem so we can look at it. So we've kind of covered things from both the beginning. So what are they doing at this point? What are they doing at the beginning of this, in the first stanza? And you can go ahead and just type in the text box or grab the mic if you want. Great. So yeah, great, Michaela. So you've got preparing for war, and I was going to say, what specifically are they doing? And then you answered that too. You said they're walking. And thanks, Sam. Yeah, they're walking back to the barracks for a rest. That's right. And so we'll actually look into this into a little bit more detail coming up at another step. But if we go back to that, okay, so what do we know? Screen. Okay. We know that they start out walking. Okay, good. Let's go back. Okay, so they start out walking. We've already mentioned that there's this part about gas. We know that they're hit with gas. And then what do we learn? What do we know from this very last stanza? We haven't covered anything there. What is that last stanza? What have we learned from that? Again, you can either grab the mic or you can type in a response. Yes, you're right, Michaela, but there's something else, and I'll add that to that list of things we know. So he is observing him. And yes, Oren, it's something really, it's a horrible thing to see. That's another one. And there's kind of a last message that I was hoping that you guys might. And there's a warning. That's right. Great. Okay, so you've all done an excellent job there. Okay, so a few things that we know then, just add to this are so we know that the speaker is watching a horrible death, and we know that there's a warning. Okay, now when we move over to what we don't know, so these are kind of going to give you some direction and things to really think about as you read the poem again later. We don't know where it took place, when it was. We don't know who died, and maybe their relationship to the speaker, right? We don't know the objective of the people being referred to in the poem. I'm thinking that's what was meant by that one, and how many others were there. Now there also, when you think about what you don't know, you can also think specifically of certain words that you don't know. So when you go through the steps and you're giving it a read through, think about the words that you don't know. So maybe we'll just take a look at the screen there, and maybe you guys can grab a marker, and if there's any words that you don't know or you think maybe other people wouldn't know, can you maybe highlight or underline or circle those words? So I'm going to highlight a few words too that I thought that you really have to think about what they mean. Okay, great. So you guys have identified a number of words. That's one of the things that you want to think about when you're thinking about things that you don't know. So it's not just the what's going on, but actually specific words too that you don't know. And so as we go through and interpret each of the lines, we can look at those words. So we're going to check for understanding in the fifth step here. So that's where you translate line by line and where you'll get to think about those words that you identified as ones that you wouldn't know, or some people wouldn't know. Okay, so bent double, like old beggars under sacks. And there we have this idea, and there's a simile there, right? A comparison. So something or someone's being compared to old beggars under sacks. So we know that this is a poem about war so far, right? We've already established that. That's the part that we knew. So who would be bent double? Go ahead and answer that in the chat box. Right, Oren, you got it. So the soldiers are bent double. Now my next question is, what does that mean? We don't normally say people are bent double. So what do these soldiers look like? How are they bent double? Thank you, Michaela and Christopher. Right, so there's something wrong with them. They're strained, and if you could actually picture something being bent double, how can people be bent double where they're hunched over, they're leaning over? And so you're to picture what old beggars are like, and having this this rough image, tiredness, hunched over. Knock-kneed. Can somebody tell me what knock-kneed means? Right, their legs are really tired. So if you can never remember a time where you've done something where you're so tired, I knew what you meant, Christopher. You're so tired. Maybe it was from running. Maybe you ran a great distance or ran so fast that your knees feel weak, like they're going to give out. That would be knock-kneed, right? Coughing like hags. We curse through the sludge. And so you can see that the poet's even, not only is he giving you this picture of what they look like, but you can hear them. They're coughing like hags. Till on the haunting flares we turned our backs. What would the flares be? Yeah, Sam, the flares could be bombs, but the flares could also be, I did a little research into this, right, and that this is that rockets which were sent up to burn with a brilliant glare to light up men and other targets. So that could be too, right? All right, so we're getting this image then. You've got these flares, so there's lights anyway, we know, right, from either bombs or something being set off, right? And towards our distant rest began to trudge. And so this is where I think Sam had mentioned that they'd be heading back to their barracks, right? Their distant rest, okay? So they're kind of their home base, right? Men march to sleep. Okay, how can men march to sleep? What is that poet trying to stress here, or the speaker? Right, just how tired they are, exactly. And you remember that that's probably, they were probably really, really tired, but to actually be sleeping while you walk, that's probably a hyperbole, right? So an extreme exaggeration. I don't think it's a metaphor, because a metaphor is a comparison, right? But maybe I guess you could say that how they were walking is being compared to sleeping, perhaps. Many had lost their boots, but limped on. Bloodshod. What does bloodshod mean? Great, thank you, Sam. Yeah, covered in blood. All went lame, all blind. Drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. So they're so tired. Look how he doesn't just say they're tired, right? This is a great thing about poetry, is that you can use this imagery and these figurative devices to really give people, to create such imagery and give them this idea of what's going on, right? So instead of just saying, they were tired, they're marching asleep. They're drunk with fatigue, right? And so deaf even to the hoots, so that's just the noise made by the shells rushing through the air, of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. So when I first read this poem, I didn't know what a 5-9 was, right? And so in a test environment, you can't go look up 5-9s. But what's great is for an assignment, you can simply look that up, right? Or you can Google it. So does anyone know what 5-9s are? Okay, that's a really good guess, Oren. And I'll actually, and Sam says gas bombs. So I'll actually tell you guys in a minute what they are. But both of those things would work in the context of that line, right? Outstripped 5 nines that dropped behind. So even if you can't go and you can't look something up, you can, fill in the blank, right? What would work here? If they're in a war setting, what could be dropping behind them? It could be airplanes, it could be gas bombs. When I looked it up, what I found was that it was 5.9 caliber explosive shells. All right, second stanza. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling. So we already had established what's going on here. There's obviously gas, right? Fitting the clumsy helmets just in time, but someone still was yelling out and stumbling. And so why, if it's gas, the question is, why would they be putting helmets on if it's gas? Does anybody know? It's kind of a trick question. Good, good, Chris. Yeah, that's great. So when I first read it, I thought to myself, helmet, how's that going to stop them? But apparently, it was the early name for gas masks. Yeah. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or limb. So here's one of those words that people might not know. What does floundering mean? So you've got the idea. I'm not even sure how I would describe floundering, but it's basically not having control over your actions, right? Like not being concise with your actions, so wobbling, floppy. Yes, so we can see that these actions are, are not smooth, right? Whatever the opposite of that would be, floundering, right? Dim through the misty panes and thick green light. So now we're envisioning this green light as under a green sea. I saw him drowning. And so here is a simile, as under a green sea. So like being under a green sea, okay, I saw him drowning. Now, is he literally drowning? What's going on here? Right, and so yeah, you guys have it. Yeah, so he's losing his breath in the gas. He has no oxygen, and I think that when by the green sea, they're just suggesting that, it's like as though he's in a sea drowning. Okay, but there was actually would have been a green kind of a haze from the gas. Okay, so third stanza here is very short. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, and drowning. So what does this mean? What's this business about dreams? I guess the question I'm asking is, why would the poet say this? What does he mean by this? Right, so that's really great insight, Chris. Yeah, that there's nothing, obviously you're getting this feeling that there was nothing he could do but watch him die, and he's describing it, right? And the dream part comes in that he's suggesting that, so this is later, he's left, he's no longer there, right? He's not amidst this. This is what he keeps dreaming about. So in all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, and drowning. And so, Chris, you've really got that where he says, before my helpless sight. So he could not help, but he watched all of this. And it says, in all my dreams. So he continues to have these dreams. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face. So there might be another word. So what would writhing mean? Right. We might not know exactly what the definition is, but we get a sense that it's moving in an unpleasant motion. You're right, and actually squirming would work too. A squirming, contorted, kind of twisting motion. His hanging face like a devil sick of sin. And so we've got another simile there. His face hanging like a devil's sick of sin. What does the poet want? When we look at this line here, what does this mean? What is the message that the poet's trying to, what feeling is he trying to evoke from us? Right, and so he really wants to stress basically that there's a lot of pain. Right, I mean, he compares it to being a devil sick of sin, like so bad that even the devil would be sick of sin, right? That's how bad. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud. And again, we have this stressing of just how bad it was. So we have, you know, these images of devil and cancer, and uses words like bitter and vile. A vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. And we have this real juxtaposition here, this real contrast between this idea of incurable sores and innocent tongues. So who would be the innocent tongues? Right, the soldiers. So you've got all of these, you know, the people, these young men who are out there in the battlefield, right? My friend, you would not tell me with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory. What do we think ardent means? Ardent would be along the lines of wanting. It has to do with enthusiasm and being passionate about something. Okay, so wanting something so passionately. So to children, passionately wanting, basically, some desperate glory. The old lie, Dulce Decorum est pro patria more. And remember, we do know that that quote, what that quote meant. Just go back here. It means how sweet and fitting it is to die for one's country. So my question to you then, so what's the main message of this poem then? Or in that is definitely one of the messages, yeah. But it's even more specific than that, I think. Who's this message to? Right, so it's to those potential soldiers, right? And who are usually young, yeah, and it can be to children, and anyone considering entering the war, right? So one of the things that we didn't do here, and I'm just going to back up here because I just realized this when I was going through. So we've gone through stanza by stanza, and you guys did really well, okay? But one of the things that we didn't do was look for any changes in the poem. So, and that's actually something that's really important. So I'm going to go back to this slide here where I've got look for changes. So there are oftentimes in a poem there's a pivotal moment where a poem will switch. It'll change. Either the mood changes or the voice, the speaker. Sometimes it can be the font of the poem changes, or the format changes. Can you guys see any changes at all in the poem? Right, so who's got the hand there? I can't tell. Probably can. Okay, so Michaela, let's look at just at the one that Michaela's pointing at first, and you're very right, Michaela. So there is a change there. Can you, like, what's the change? What change did you notice?
The change that I noticed was just after they were getting on their helmets, where the one he was starting to say someone was still yelling out and stumbling. That's sort of the turning point where now all the emotions onto this man that's sort of dying from the poisonous gas.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're completely right. That's right. Yeah, and so, and the tone changes, doesn't it? So we've got this idea of this really, it starts out like like he really focuses on how tired these soldiers are, right? And so you've got this idea, and you're picturing it in your mind of these tired soldiers, right? And then all of a sudden, the tone changes, and you're right, there's this, all of a sudden there's all of this action, right? And people are moving, they're stumbling, right? No more is there this, it's a fast pace now. And also you can imagine, and you could hear when the reader read the poem, that there is a change in tone too. So you're right, there's definitely a shift there. And you'll actually see that there's a shift too, and I've seen it where the first word's capitalized, and then I've seen it in this version, the second word is capitalized, but you'll see too sometimes it's just the font that's used, so now it's capitalized, so it's something's being stressed, right? Okay, now somebody is identified over, oh, that's not what I wanted, over here. Okay, did somebody identify that as Sam? Did you? Was that you? So whomever's noticed a change here, can you explain what the shift is? Right, so I'd agree. It's almost like now it's a personal emotion, right, that you get from the speaker, his feelings about this. So before he tends to be kind of just recalling some events, and then suddenly there's a change in that it's now there's some emotion to those events. So I would agree, yeah, there's a shift there. And there's just a shift in kind of, yeah, you know, how he's just explaining the events, and then, yeah, there's that feeling in there, right? So, okay, now did somebody identify this one here? Chris, was that you? Can you explain what the shift is, the change is there? Okay, so it goes from talking about the guy to talking about how people should not go to war. Yeah, so he's recalling these events, right? About people, you know, starts out with this group of soldiers, then he's recalling what happened to this particular soldier and watching it, and then then all of a sudden it shifts, or I shouldn't say all of a sudden, it leads into a warning, right? And it goes to a message about war. Right. Yep. You guys have done a fantastic job. All right. So what I should mention actually is that when you're going through and you're doing this, and you're, you know, say you're in an exam, or you're doing it's just an assignment, just as we've written all over here, write all over the poem, right? As long as it's not in a book that has to be returned that doesn't belong to you, you know, write all over it. You know, do exactly what we've done here. You know, circle the words that you don't know and that you have to think about. Identify those shifts, poetic devices, all of that. And that'll help you with interpreting the poem. Okay, so we've gone through stanza by stanza. You'd look at the form and function. So the idea being then that you would look at you know, does he use a certain, you know, is it a ballad, is it a sonnet, is there a specific kind of form? A sonnet has a certain number of lines and so forth. Although that might not really help you with the interpretation of the poem, it'll give you an idea of what kind of poem it is. And ask yourself, you know, look for poetic devices. And this poem, we've already talked about them, so we're not going to go through them, but there's more than we even actually discussed as we were going through. Look for things like capitalization and punctuation, because it could be that the capitalization has been done for a certain reason, like when we see it here, right, to show that change and that urgency or importance. And then you check for improved understanding. So if you went through and read it again, now you've got this great idea, you've got these images in your mind, and you can put it all together. Okay, so what I wanted to do, so we'll give this a shot again. I've just got one more YouTube clip I wanted to show you. So I'm expecting that some people it will be slower for some than others. It's a short one, and the reason I picked it, like I said, there are so many. There's one that somebody did, like an animated one, and I really liked it, but it had some really inappropriate comments underneath, so I didn't want to share due to that reason. But the one I picked was one that some students actually had, just going to go through and find the website. Some students had created a video for an English class. And what I really liked about it, oops, oh, if I can, sorry you guys, I'm just trying to figure out how to get rid of my pointer. Just write it in. Just going to stop it here. All right, so the reason I chose this one was because I really liked the sounds in it. I thought that it really, I just found the sounds really powerful that they used.
On the fencing flags, we turned our backs and towards our distant rest against the church. Men lost to sleep. Many have lost their hopes and looked up. Legend. All but flame, all blind, drunk with fatigue. Death beneath guns, gas shot. Drunk and sun. Gas. Quick voice. you could get or reach out with let them gather from the self-corrected light, but see it can bit which can help gather and cure the souls of innocent light. My friend, you would not tell such as this to children ardent for some desperate glory. Well, Dulce at Decorum wrote the truth.
All right, so the reason I picked that one, as I said, was I thought it was neat that students had made that. Not my students, but it was just one I found on YouTube. And I thought they did a really good job with the sound effects and with the acting. And some of them that are on YouTube are quite gruesome, and that one I didn't, find too bad. So, although war is very gruesome, right? All right, so we've pretty much gone through then all of the steps. So the first step, we'll just do a quick review then. The first step would be look at the title, what does it tell you? And so we found out what this title meant, and it's basically the whole theme of the poem, right? Don't believe that all that they say about war, here's the truth. Give it a read through, ask what you do know and what you don't know. And we could actually go back and look at those questions of what we don't know to figure some of those answers out. Look for changes, those shifts, which you guys did awesome at. Check for your understanding by going through each of the lines and interpreting it. Consider the form and the poetic devices, which oftentimes you'll end up doing when you go through and interpret each of the lines. And then give it one last read through to check for your understanding. And hopefully by the end there, when you read it that last time, you'll go, oh, now I get it. Or I thought I got it before, but now I really get it. Now I can completely have those images in my mind and get the theme of the poem. So are there any questions regarding that poem? What I would suggest you do when you go to do the assignment, so it is a question mark assignment, is go through and if you can, print out the poem, jot down notes all over it. So the idea really wasn't that it would be like a test. It was just, the idea is that you should be able to find these answers, but you can look at the poem and your notes in order to help you. Oh, that's such a good question, Oren. So if he died in the war, how do we get his poem? I'll have to Google that one. That's a good question. Maybe he wrote it in a letter to someone, or quite often actually. I know a lot different than we have today, but a lot of people wrote journals back then, right? And so that would have been the First World War. Okay, and so when we do a little research, say on the titles, that it would have come up at actually, can you guys hold on? I might have an answer to that question. All right, but I will definitely look that question up. Are there any other questions? And I think you guys will be at a really big advantage having gone through this before you actually take the question mark assignment. As I said, it's not meant to be considered like a test, okay? But a lot of students find it really challenging, and I think it's because they don't go through and do that line-by-line interpretation before they go into question mark, right? So, you know, be prepared before you get in, because it's still, there's a time limit for the length of time that you can use to take it, but you guys will definitely be at an advantage. All right. Yeah, Oren, I think lately TELUS has been having some issues. I've got TELUS at home, and it seems to be having issues with the internet lately, kicking me off. Okay, so are there any questions just about English 10 in general? So next week, I'm going to be gone next week. So continue to hand assignments in if you've got them. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean you can't email me assignments, and I'll mark them. I'm hoping to be able to check my email occasionally to be able to answer questions.